Bracing for Ian. A hurricane intensifies as it heads towards Florida. How the federal government is preparing. Demanding accountability. Lawmakers call for action to protect pro-life pregnancy centers. Divisive state funeral. The slain former leader of Japan is remembered with military pomp amid protests. And defend us in battle. How a new film on Saint Michael the Archangel is aiming to inspire a new generation. On EWTN News Nightly for Tuesday, September 27th, 2022.
Your safety is more important than anything. And I know our hearts are with everyone who will feel the effects of this storm. And we'll be with you.
Natural disaster. President Joe Biden warns about the danger of Hurricane Ian. Thank you so much for being with us tonight on this feast of St. Vincent de Paul. I'm Tracy Sable. Well, the hurricane that lashed Cuba with heavy rain and wind is now targeting Florida's Gulf Coast. Tampa and St. Petersburg could get their first direct hit since 1921. The Federal Emergency Management Agency is bracing for Hurricane Ian. White House correspondent Owen Jensen was in the briefing room today as the FEMA administrator gave an update. Owen.
Hi, Tracy. I was also in the Rose Garden today when President Joe Biden addressed the approaching storm, and I heard him issue this warning.
Forecasts can change, but for now, the experts say this could be a very severe hurricane, life-threatening and devastating in its impact.
And in the Rose Garden, President Joe Biden also said his administration is on alert and in action to help the people of Florida.
FEMA has already deployed 700 personnel to Florida, and the governor has activated 5,000 state National Guard with another 2,000 guards coming from other states.
Earlier, Hurricane Ian tears into western Cuba, sustained top winds 125 miles an hour, and significant storm surge. Authorities evacuated more than 50,000 people, and there's nothing to stop it from intensifying into a catastrophic Category 4 storm before it hits Florida on Wednesday. Tampa General Hospital installing an aquafence to protect against potential flooding. In the press briefing room today, FEMA's administrator telling reporters,
so the main message I have for everyone in Florida is that this is going to impact everyone.
2.5 million people ordered to evacuate before it crashes ashore. Tampa residents boarding up homes, damage expected across a wide area regardless of where Ian makes landfall.
By the time it reaches the shores of Florida, the storm is going to slow down to approximately 5 miles per hour. And this is significant because what this means is that Floridians are going to experience the impacts from this storm for a very long time.
And Florida's Governor Ron DeSantis urging people to heed the warnings.
In some areas, there will be catastrophic flooding and life-threatening storm surge.
Also in that press briefing today, FEMA said their biggest concern right now is storm surge, which you just heard the governor of Florida refer to at the end of my story there. It's a leading cause of hurricane-related fatalities, storm surge that is. Also, they expect there could be as much as 25 inches of rain falling in Florida in some places. And if they tell you to evacuate, officials say, please, please listen to them. At the White House, Owen Jensen, EWTN News Nightly.
Florida Senator Rick Scott also received a briefing from FEMA officials ahead of Hurricane Ian's landfall. He told EWTN News Nightly that everyone along the Gulf Coast should take time to prepare now.
We've got a lot of low-lying areas on the West Coast, right? And so if that water comes up, 5 to 10 feet, your house is going to get hurt, and you're not going to survive if you stay there. That's one thing that's going to happen. We're going to see a lot of rain, right? And as you know, tornadoes come off.
Well, Senator Scott says after the storm, critical needs like access to food and water will be limited. He says people who plan to ride out the storm must be prepared to be on their own for days. The Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade several months ago, and reaction since then has been vocal and in some cases violent. Many are targeting crisis pregnancy care centers and Catholic churches. And now a pair of pro-life House Republicans are demanding that the Biden administration punish those causing the damage. Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales has more.
Representatives Chris Smith and Cathy McMorris Rodgers have introduced the Protect Pregnancy Care Centers Act. Lawmakers tell me nearly 70 acts of violence have taken place against pregnancy care centers by the pro-abortion group known as Jane's Revenge.
When you break a window and you throw a firebomb into somewhere, that's terrorism, and it's happening right before our eyes.
Congressional Pro-Life Caucus Chair Chris Smith tells me the bill is needed to protect the 3,000 centers nationwide. Congresswoman Cathy McMorris Rodgers wrote in a statement, quote, "We need to ensure the safety and security of pregnancy care centers that provide life-affirming alternatives to abortion, offering critical quality care for women facing challenging pregnancies, and helping to save so many unborn innocent lives." The bill would require the Inspector Generals of the Justice Department and Homeland Security to investigate and disclose to Congress information on the Biden administration's response to the violence, including any prosecutions, and report on current funding streams available to pregnancy care centers for needed security measures. Some Democrats are fueling the situation, claiming these centers hurt women seeking advice.
The evidence of abuse is overwhelming. It is time to crack down on deceptive and misleading practices that many crisis pregnancy centers employ.
The abortion issue is so vital in the upcoming election. Planned Parenthood, the nation's largest abortion provider, has given more than $50 million to pro-abortion candidates.
From 2016 to 2020, 828,000 babies survived what most likely would have been an abortion because of the pregnancy care centers. From Planned Parenthood's point of view, and they now do more than 40% of all the abortions in America, that's hurting their business.
The U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops is urging Congress to speak out against this violence and urging law enforcement to protect those in increased danger. At the Capitol, Eric Rosales, EWTN News Nightly.
Japan held a state funeral today for its slain former leader Shinzo Abe. Prime Minister Fumio Kishida led a procession into the ceremony, followed by Abe's widow. U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris was among the dignitaries who attended. The funeral drew protests because it was tax-funded without a vote by Parliament. There were other objections as well, since the honor is usually reserved for an emperor, not a political figure. Our Russian soldiers are now being told they will be cleansed of all of their sins if they die during the war against Ukraine. That troubling message comes from Patriarch Kirill, the head of the Russian Orthodox Church. He is considered a key ally of Russian President Vladimir Putin. The Patriarch suggested to Russian recruits that their sins will be washed away if they sacrifice their lives. The Polish Prime Minister blames sabotage for a series of unusual leaks on 2 energy pipelines. Seismic monitors registered 2 explosions near the Nord Stream 1 and 2 pipelines that are designed to deliver natural gas from Russia to Germany. This comes as Europe seeks to limit its dependence, that is, on Russian energy. The Vatican Secretary of State says the elimination of nuclear weapons is a moral imperative. Cardinal Pietro Parolin cited warnings from Pope Francis about the catastrophic effects of nuclear war. He pointed to the conflict in Ukraine as a looming threat. The Cardinal spoke at a United Nations meeting focused on disarmament. Meanwhile, in space, NASA conducted an experiment to avert a different kind of catastrophe, namely the risk of an asteroid striking the Earth. The agency successfully crashed a spacecraft into a small, non-threatening asteroid last night. It will measure the results of the impact to determine if the collision changed the orbit. Coming up, a Vatican meeting on the ethics of medical science, and the global movement focusing on prayer and fasting. Newly published research indicates increased pregnancy complications when a frozen embryo used for in vitro fertilization. One significant result shows a mother would have a 74% greater risk for high blood pressure from a frozen embryo compared with fertilization from a so-called fresh embryo or from natural conception. The results are published in the American Heart Association journal hypertension. Well, a Vatican group is hosting a conference about the ethics of engineering life. The Pontifical Academy for Life organized the meeting. It brings together clinicians, philosophers, and communicators to apply approaches to living systems. Joining us now from Rome is Henk Ten Have, Professor Emeritus at Duquesne University. Thank you so much for your time today, sir. Can you tell us more about this conference?
Yeah, we had a two-day conference as a meeting between experts in life science and experts in human sciences and ethics. And the idea was to listen to each other and to exchange views, because scientific developments are so rapid today that we need to understand how they can benefit human beings.
And I understand that you were one of the speakers this morning. Can you tell us what your talk focused on?
Yeah, I was talking about the need to have a somewhat broader view of ethics, that ethics not only concerns research, but it also has to do with the question who is benefiting from the research. If you have a new development and it is so expensive that people cannot afford it, the question is whether it is useful to develop it. Because if we have new breakthroughs, they should in fact become available for everybody around the globe. And that is a major problem today, where we know that there are so many differences between countries and healthcare systems.
And I'm curious, what is the connection between the Church, the Vatican, and these kinds of conferences? Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, in a religious perspective, you have clear views about what is benefiting human beings. And so we have to look at scientific developments from a kind of positive point of view and see how they can contribute to the improvement of humankind. And also try to avoid the negative impact that sometimes also exists when we have new scientific developments. So that it's more like how can we view at the capability of human beings to develop knowledge and to make it useful for humankind.
Well, thank you so much, sir, for your time today. We really appreciate it. Henk Ten Have, Professor Emeritus at Duquesne University. Thank you again. God bless you. A week-long event kicks off later this week, reminding the faithful of the importance of fasting. The 30th Annual International Week of Prayer and Fasting starts on Saturday. In the United States, the faithful can attend an event on Saturday at the Basilica of the National Shrine of the Immaculate Conception here in Washington, D.C. There will also be a 3-day online conference starting next Monday. And joining us now to talk more about this is Maureen Flynn, Catholic journalist and co-founder of the International Week of Prayer and Fasting. Maureen, great to be with you today.
And thank you for having us. And we are very excited that October 1st will be our 30th International Week of Prayer and Fasting. So it goes from October 1st to October 9th. And this year we're back at the Basilica. For 2 years because of the lockdown, we did virtual. But this year we're back at the Basilica, and we have Bishop Joseph Cathy, who is going to be with us, who is just one of the great bishops out there. He goes to the abortion clinics and he prays the rosary. And then we have Segi Acosta, Legion of Mary, Father Peffley, Legion of Mary. Also, we have the Divine Mercy for America, Joan and Dave Maroney, and then my own husband, Ted Flynn. And we'll be having all these groups, the Asian Americans, African Americans, the Spanish, praying the Holy Rosary. And then we're having confessions all day, Eucharistic adoration all day, and Holy Mass at 1. And then we go into a virtual conference, October 3, 4, and 5. Father Frank Pavone will have a Mass that will be a live stream Mass every day, those 3 days. And then we have speakers, 4 speakers every day, and we end with the Divine Mercy Chaplet. We pray the Holy Rosary. So there's 17 speakers in all that we'll be having over the next several days. And then we end October 9th joining forces with Rosary Coast to Coast, who is having the National Rosary Rally on the D.C. Capitol. So it's 9 days of fasting and prayer, which we need for our church, we need it for our country, our leaders, we need it for the world.
Absolutely. I mean, what a wonderful event. I'm curious, what's been the response I mean, you've been doing this for 30 years now. What's been the response for this one?
Huge. I think people are very concerned, especially right now we have the hurricane bearing down on Florida, and people are concerned because of what's going on in Russia and Ukraine, our country. There seems to be so much corruption. There's a lot of problems with marriages and families. We all know all the problems, but we've been told by heaven that prayer and fasting is huge. And the great Saint John Paul II, who gave us 2 apostolic blessings, said, Jesus has shown us by his own example that prayer and fasting are the first and most effective weapons against the forces of evil. So I love that quote.
Yeah.
And Mother Teresa was a huge supporter of the movement. And Mother Angelica spoke in 2000. She was our keynote speaker at the Basilica. And it was like having a rock star at the Basilica. It was packed, 6,000 to 7,000 people. And wow, did she ever, give the great talk. And of course, we are focusing on the Eucharist this year, on Our Lady, and heaven's weapons to defeat evil.
Yeah, it's going to be wonderful. I know it is, for sure, as every year. Let's talk about fasting a little bit more, though, and the importance of it, and what the church says about it.
Yes, fasting is huge. Years ago, when I started to read about fasting and the importance of it, we were running a crisis pregnancy center. Of course, I was a lot younger, but there was 9 days, and we fasted on bread and water. And on the 9th day, one of the local pro-abortion leaders came to the pregnancy center that we were running at the time, and we prayed for her. We had people in the back room praying the rosary for her. So I saw firsthand how fasting brings forward things. And the great saints always said that prayer and fasting is necessary when there's something that's very stubborn and there's a very big evil and when you need a breakthrough. Mm-hmm. And so all these years, of course, the killing of the innocent is a big, huge thing. And of course, with the Dobbs decision, I think God is starting to have our prayers are becoming answered.
Absolutely. If folks want to come, where can they get more information?
Okay, they go to our website at iwopf.org, and every day, so for example, we're live streaming the day at the Basilica, so it's free. And then October 3rd, October 4th and 5th, so Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, every day is free. And then later, if they've missed it, they can sign up for an All Access Pass, which is on the website. We kept it really inexpensive, so up to a year, they can watch all these 17 talks. And many groups are signing up as prayer groups, and families. They're signing up and saying, okay, we'll get together, we'll have a potluck as a prayer group, and we'll watch one of the talks this week, and the next week we'll watch another talk. So that's really caught on.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Maureen, we have probably a little less than a minute left. Anything else you want to talk about when it comes to the event that's coming up, and also other things that are on your mind?
Yes, I would just like to encourage everyone in light of the situation with the hurricane in Florida. Tomorrow, I would encourage all of us to do some kind of fasting, some kind of sacrifice, and pray the Holy Rosary, Divine Mercy Chaplet, and ask Our Lady, Queen of the Holy Angels, to surround the state of Florida with legions of holy angels, and as Mother of Mercy, that she goes to her Son and asks for great mercy and mitigation, and that this storm weakens considerably, and we will see the power of the Lord.
Absolutely, we need to do that. I'm so glad you said that. We'll all be praying for sure. Maureen, thank you so much for coming on. We appreciate it, and good luck with the event.
Thank you.
We'll be praying for you.
God bless.
Up next, an inspiring new documentary on the Archangel who defends us in battle. Well, the Feast of the Holy Archangels is on Thursday, and one Catholic journalist suggests the faithful should spend part of the day in a movie theater. That's because this Thursday is the one day to view a film on the big screen all about Saint Michael the Archangel.
Michael is the breath of the Holy Spirit who will defeat the Antichrist and all evil spirits.
Saint Michael, Meet the Angel, examines his role in helping the faithful from historical and cultural aspects. The documentary from Fathom Events is being shown in theaters around the United States and will be available for streaming after Thursday. And we go now to the movie's U.S. producer, Oscar Delgado, who also happens to be a former war correspondent with NBC News. Oscar, great to see you. Thanks so much for coming on. Talk to us a little bit more about the movie.
Thank you.
Well, we're so grateful. So thank you so much, Oscar. If you don't mind, tell us a little bit more about the movie and also how and why you got involved.
Well, the film is about Saint Michael and all the other angels. And I got involved because there's a problem, I think, at this point of we need weapons to help. I mean, you talked with Maureen about prayer and fasting, which is really critical. But the other element that we need to talk about are how God gives us holy angels, especially Saint Michael, to combat the culture. And so what happened is I was approached, my last film was Purgatory, and I was approached again by a documentary maker that gave it to me and said, look, can you look at the film? Can you recut it? Can you make it for a U.S. audience? And I looked at it, I recut it, I put some other bonus features in there, and then I released it again because for the Feast of Saint Michael, because we need the Holy Angels, Tracy. We need to get the Holy Angels involved in our battle. And sometimes we forget that God has given us these tools to move forward and that we're not alone. And so that's why I was inspired to make this film and to make it known to everyone.
Yeah, and I know this is the first documentary of its kind about Saint Michael. Let's talk a little bit more about why you think it's so important for people to learn more about this extraordinary archangel, especially, Oscar, in these times that we're living in right now.
Well, Saint Michael, I mean, he has protected the faithful from plague. He has healed all through history. You can see that he has been very much invoked for against violence, about the attacks, about war. And you see in the documentary, you see all these different elements that Saint Michael is involved in, and he's a very big warrior. And what's interesting is Saint Michael is humble. I mean, when the battle was on, what was the first thing he said? Who is like unto God? So Saint Michael, through his humility, has his power. And so when you see the documentary, you'll see all the different elements and all the different things he has done through history and why we really need him now, especially Revelation 12. Talk about where we are now. We're in a battle, and we need the holy angels. We need to call on Saint Michael. We need to call on the holy angels. And if you see the film, you will understand the importance of what we're doing, of what's going on now, and why we need to reach into them and invoke them, which is really critical at this point.
Absolutely. Another thing I want to talk about in the film, it's extremely visual, showing beautiful architecture and art. Can you talk more about that?
Yes, we went to the basilicas that are devoted to Saint Michael, and one of the places is a cave in Gargano, and it's beautiful. I mean, these basilicas that have been made in honor and of Saint Michael, you will really get to see the beauty and the power and the majesty of who he is and what he's about. Just walking in, there's a story about Saint Francis never went into the cave of Saint Michael because of the holiness. It's just unbelievable. But you will feel when you go and you see this film, you will feel the power, I believe, and the importance of invoking the holy angels and really starting to develop a relationship, especially with the Saint Michael and your own guardian angel. And that's what we try to bring out in this film. It's funny, September 29th, as you said, is the feast of Saint Michael and the other archangels. That's why I picked the date. Sometimes they come to me and said, where do you want it? And I did it purposely on September 29th because I want to connect heaven and earth, so in a sense. So being a war producer, I could see so much violence. So I figured, you know what? I want to do something that we can combat that, a remedy. And this is one of the things that I did and can continue to do with having this type of a film out there.
Yeah, and I want to quickly, we're running out of time, but I do want to touch on that. As we mentioned, you used to be a war correspondent. How did you call upon Saint Michael during those times when you were in those war zones?
Well, when I was in Sarajevo, there was one of the nights I remember that I was at the square and bullets started flying. And I remember calling out, praying to Saint Michael's for protection. And, people were hit on the left, but I was not hit. And I gave and I attributed it to the Saint Michael. So I guess the thing is, being a war producer, I always kind of saw the worst of humanity. And I said, when I retired and started doing something else, I wanted to bring out what we can do to combat what is going on in this war, because we are in a battle. So Saint Michael was one of the things that inspired me, and seeing this and putting it together, I want others to join in and know that we're not alone in this battle and this fight, and that we need to invoke again Saint Michael and our own guardian angels. So if you go to stmichaelmovie.com, there you can see where it's playing. It's playing in the United States, in Puerto Rico, Poland, and the UK. It's an international release because other countries want it. So I'm very grateful, but I do want people to be able to experience and really start developing a devotion to the holy angels. It's important at these times.
Absolutely it is. And thank you so much for doing this movie, Oscar. We appreciate, can't wait to see you. Thank you for your time. God bless you.
God bless you, Tracy.
And we thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Tracy Sable. Good night and God bless.